Just, we do have a sign-in sheet for everyone up here at the table, so if you would please sign it, we'd appreciate it. And the bathrooms, they have to go to the bathroom, it's just down around the corner. So we're kind of tight here with our new quarters, so bear with us. So if we can stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And Mr. Violator, if you would give your invitation, please remain standing.
Lord, grant us patience to be fair and honest with everyone and treated as equals, and that we have a good, pleasant meeting. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. So, Mr. Malawi, are you ready to call the roll?
Roll call. Code?
Yes.
Yerke?
Here.
Driscoll?
Here.
Jovic?
Here.
Rollinger?
Aye.
Williams?
Here.
Mack?
Here.
Violata?
Aye.
Harris?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Okay, item number 4, approval of the agenda. Board can't take any official action on any items on the agenda. Has everyone had a chance to look at the agenda? Any changes?
I'll move to approve.
Motion to approve, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Steve. All in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Conflict of interest disclosure. Had a chance to go to listen to a couple other water districts, see how they handle their meetings. James Valley Water District has this same item on their agenda, and what they did is they simply asked if there was any board members that would have any conflict of interest on any of the items on the agenda. Would you please make it noted at this time? Anyone have a conflict of interest on the agenda items?
I'll have a conflict with number 9, the Streamgages, and this will come up in our minutes. The minutes for last meeting under item 6 state that I'm a former USGS employee. I'm actually a current employee. I'm a retiree, but returned in a position as a rehired annuitant. So I'm a current federal part-time employee. So at any rate, I do have a conflict with number 9, the stream gauging. And then items 10 and 11, it probably does not amount to a conflict, but I want to make people aware that the completion reports for both items 10 and 11 mention collaboration with USGS in terms of sampling that had been done. I don't know that the new proposals mention any such thing, but if they would, I'd have to excuse myself from those items.
Okay. Is there any other director that have a conflict on any of the items on the agenda? Seeing none, just so note. Approval of previous minutes of the last meeting.
Under item 6, as Mr. Driscoll said, it should be struck out as former employee and put current.
Okay. Let's see, I had one on item number 18 at the last paragraph there. It should include, it says Dr. Kelsey, it's actually Dr. Kelsey Murray. You could include that as a change.
I'd move to approve with the noted changes.
Okay, motion's been made to approve the minutes. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Mr. Wolf.
What item was Dr.?
On item 18, the last sentence there, not the last sentence, the last paragraph, regarding Dr. Kelsey Murray. Her last name is excluded.
Got it, thank you.
There's okay, there's been a motion made to approve the minutes from last meeting. All, pardon me?
Who made that motion?
Steve made the motion, seconded by,
As amended, correct?
Correct.
as amended. And Ron Kof seconded the motion. All right, all in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign, motion carried. That moves us to the treasurer's report.
Dan said they got the treasurer's report in the packet, and then Dan also put something in that shows that there's some major expenses that Bob had to sign today. I've not got my name on the bank yet. We're gonna be doing that, I believe, Thursday, if Linda's available and Dan's available.
Okay.
So in the meantime, Bob's actually been filling in and taking care of the,
Report.
right, correct.
Okay. Mr. Lyons?
All right, well, right now, we have, I'm sorry that we don't have a screen for you, but we don't have a projector or a screen. You won't be able to follow along unless you have one of the agenda packets. But
It's in the packet.
it's about number 11, page 11. Okay, and projected revenues, $200,000 for this year. And, funds on hand, $468,036.69. Total expenses to date, it looks like it's just the, Dan, is it just the checks for the directors at $834?
It's everything to date this year,
Okay.
so we have a lot of school of mines checks,
Okay,
the admin check,
yeah.
Did you get one of these, Bob? That was
Office supplies.
Correct.
Oh, and it's been amended since the package that I picked up.
and, yeah, it's,
All right.
they did a moving target.
I know. So the expenses for the director, total director expenses, $1,861.22. Admin expenses, $1,563.37. Legal and consulting fees, $6,509.99. Admin budget year-to-date, $9,934.58. The total water projects that we've written checks for, $17,377.29. Total expenditure year-to-date, $27,311.87. We have the admin budget remaining is $79,965.42. And the remaining project numbers are $298,892.71. If you need more additional information about various projects and so forth, it'll be on the second page of that. It'll be on the page 12. If you have page 12, you're looking at an old copy. Sorry.
Move to approve the treasurer's report.
Moved by James to approve the,
Second.
and seconded by Steve to approve the treasurer's report. Is there any discussion on the treasurer's report by the board members? If not, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign, motion carried. So we covered all those items in on the treasurer's report. I guess so.
So next one, are you on the next designate new meeting space yet, number 8?
Well, I was just asking, there was A, B, and C under treasurer's
Oh.
report. Have we covered all those?
Yeah.
Yeah, the major expenses and
Okay.
talk about the signature cards.
Okay, very good. So that moves us to 8, then designate new meeting space. Director Williams.
Yeah, we did get together, and there seems to be a number of people that went out and did some investigation, and I hope that those that found a place give us a little idea who and where and when. I know we were looking at, okay, Linda.
I can start. I checked with the South Dakota School of Mines. They have rooms in their classroom building that we would be able to hold our meetings. They would charge $25 per meeting, as opposed to for-profit entities would be paying $100. The room holds up to 60 people. It has a screen, so we could use our projector. Parking in the evenings on campus usually isn't a problem, but we could get visitor passes.
Okay. Steve Brown and I did go down and talk to the folks down at the City School Administration Building. And I guess, Steve, you could jump in. He actually talked to Shirley Flexner. She's the one in charge of the meeting rooms down there. And just for your information, the school district is still occupying that building with the city. Their plan is to move to their new facility over in the old Black Hills Power building across from the YMCA, but they're not going to be out of there till probably later on this year. So I guess if you want to jump in, Steve, and add to that.
Yeah, she had called and visited with me and said the same thing, basically what Dan had just said, is that until that happens, the meeting space is pretty well used. She did suggest that we take a look at maybe the library.
City library.
Correct. So that might be an option to take a look at.
Okay.
What about the community room at the city?
The community room is now not available,
Right.
but it would be upstairs on the third floor.
They have meeting rooms. They've moved. They use the community room now, so they moved upstairs, and they've got the rooms are perfect.
Yeah, they've really got some
But
nice
she had
rooms.
said that right now they're pretty well used, and until the school moves out, we wouldn't have access.
And when was the school moving again?
They don't know it because they're
it's-
doing some remodeling at the old Black Hills Power office down there, and so they were hoping to be out by the time the school starts, but it's still up in the air, I guess. So they'll stay there until they're ready to move in.
Okay, so it could be fall.
Could be
or
fall.
After.
Yeah.
I think there was also somebody that mentioned talking to the Game Fish and Parks
Yeah,
Department,
we have to get out there too early.
and that,
That was the issue.
Yeah.
We had to be out there at a certain time, and then Tuesdays were booked, and so it's a booking. That's a busy place.
do we have a time limit on tonight?
No.
Okay.
What about the Horace Mann School, where there's a library set up? They do community meetings there.
Possibility. Yeah, I guess, if you've got a contact up there.
I don't. There would
Okay.
be somebody on a committee that does that.
Well, I do know they do have a nice meeting room down at the library because some of the organizations that I used to belong to, still South Dakota Engineering Society has their luncheons down there in that room on the second floor at the
And
library.
that's what Horace Mann is too. They're also a after-hours library.
The issue with the library, though, from looking from the past, they want you gone by 7:30.
The Horace Mann's
9
different.
o'clock.
I'm just talking
That's what I'm saying. The
seconds.
Horace Mann, they have the North Rapids Civic Association meetings there now. I think that would be a good venue, possibly.
I'll stop over and take a look if somebody wants to. I'll have no problem going over there finding out if it's available.
I'd have time to do that too, actually. So
If you want to maybe go to the library, I'll go to the Horace Mann if you want to do that.
could do that. Anybody else have any ideas?
Horace Mann, that's the one on Maple, right?
Do we have to have the location fixed?
As far as,
Could we rotate it?
oh,
We'd have to declare it every meeting.
I think it would be better if we had one spot like we have in the past, because then people know how to get there.
Yeah, we need to vote on it the meeting before, so.
So
That's
we're going to
the
be
main
here
one.
next.
So for the March meeting, we'll be meeting here again, is that what you're saying?
Unless you guys vote tonight to change it, yeah. So what I've been doing is booking just ahead a month here, just in case.
Good idea.
But to change the time or cancel a meeting or the location, the board has to vote 30 days. Has to be a 30-day notice.
Is there, just ask Linda, is there a time limit to the meeting place at School of Mines?
I didn't ask, but I told her that typically they'd run from like 6 to 9 or 10. And she didn't think that would be a problem.
Okay. Well, I would say maybe we meet here again in March, and hopefully we can get something figured out in the next month. Any objections to that idea?
Dan, does that take a motion to
No,
set
it's
that
already,
up?
it's already set up. This is our official meeting place as of right now.
Yeah.
It's already passed, so.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Because the last vote was until further notice. This is what
Yeah.
we need.
Okay. So we'll meet here in March then, and hopefully have a place by then.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for taking the time to do that. Okay, that's number 8. Number 9, cost share funding of the USGS stream flow gauges for Castle Creek above Deerfield Lake and Rhodes Fork of Rapid Creek near Roxford. I wanted to put this on the agenda for discussion from the board members. As you know, we discontinued funding that a year or so ago, and I would like to have the board reconsider it personally. Joyce Williamson, the director for the USGS here, and she has submitted a funding proposal for those two, joint funding agreement for those two gauging stations. And she's here to answer any questions. Are there any questions? You've seen what she's submitted. I do know that from the last time we funded, the Bureau of Reclamation is funding about 25% of the Castle Creek gauging station above Deerfield Reservoir. And I guess it's going to continue to do that. Is that right, Joyce? And then Rhodes Fork, we learned at the last meeting that the equipment had been removed. Maybe you could talk a little bit about what we'd have to do to get that gauging station set back up for real-time service.
So we still have the equipment. So the things that were removed are still currently, they were just put back in our cycle for use at other locations. So they're still there and they're available. With the current backlog for staff, it would probably be April before we could get those back in. The staff is pretty busy right now after the furlough, so we did adjust the price to reflect that. It would be a full-time gauge until April, but the equipment's still available, so it's just labor to go out and do that, and we can do that later on. So.
I do have a question. This funding agreement is just to the end of your fiscal year, which is September 30th, right? So that it'd be, we'd have to have another one going forward from there.
Correct.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
I got a question too, I don't know.
go ahead.
How long is that gauging station been out of commission?
So it was still operated as a peak flow site, so it wasn't continuous discharge, but only, so it was the equipment, it was discontinued October a year ago. So after this group voted to not fund it, then it was changed to a peak flow site.
Okay, and so has anybody noticed that there's been anything changed there? I haven't heard anything.
Sure, I mean, we always get requests for why, whether or not people had the funding to come forward, then that's a different matter. But people notice, but it's not. I have specific names. I'm sorry, even. There are a lot of people up in the area. I would assume it's primarily locals that are noticing it. Where you often notice that that attention is given to something is when someone wants to look at long-term trends or look at the historic data. And for those, I don't typically answer those questions anymore. I don't know if they've gotten any of that at the Rose Fourth one. I honestly don't know.
Anything else?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Nathan has the floor.
I guess, without having any information as far as why these are needed, I mean, if it's been offline for over a year and a half, and nobody's indicated any issue, nobody's, as far as you know, you're the director, I guess, right?
I'm the director.
As far as you know, you don't know of anybody that's mentioned anything as far as missing that gauging station or the functionality that you removed. Why would we need to fund that again?
Well, the advantage that both gauges provide is that long-term drought seasonal influence. So you really get an indication of how the aquifers are responding to long-term climatic changes. It's obvious in both of the records, and so, that may not be something you notice that it's missing this year or next, but 10 years from now you might go, dang, it'd be really good to have that information because we don't understand why we have this change now. So often it's not an immediate thing that makes it obvious for people.
I will comment, I used to manage the Rapid City water system, and those gauging stations, starting from the sources, which is these two are,
Yep.
to Rapid Creek drainage, is very important in terms of managing the water systems, all the water systems that go down below those two sources. And it's part of that whole chain of stream gauges and information that water management uses to make decisions on, exactly.
Mr. Chairman, I got a follow-up to your comment.
Yes.
Is there anybody from the city of Rapid City here? Okay. Have you missed those those gauging stations?
What I'm more concerned about is that I was here during the 72 flood, and the more we know about what's upstream coming down toward us.
Emergency management doesn't.
Could you identify yourself, please?
Barbara Dumpy,
And you're,
I'm a native of Rapid City.
okay, thank
and
you.
I'm still living here.
Okay, thank you.
Dan, James Insiders, hand up for a bit.
Well, I was going to see if Nathan is,
No, thank you.
okay. James?
Okay, I have a few items. Barbara, just so you know, those gauges have no management system on them for early warning for flood stage. Were you aware of that?
I figure any gauging we know, though, of water upstream is going to help us figure out in the long term what's going on with our hydrogeology.
Okay.
Can I
Just a second.
respond to that? So they are real time. So they are available. Well, previously Rose Fork was, but Castle Creek is real time. So it is there for anyone, public or management, government, to see and respond to what's happening at those locations.
But have we ever had a flood from a
Pardon?
natural spring?
Well, what we do see from them is more, if flows are higher in the springtime, then the runoff is likely going to be more responsive.
This is a natural fed spring. This is
Right,
a lake or
but
dam.
like Castle Creek above has been as high as 300 CFS.
Yeah,
That's a pretty small.
the drainage area above Castle Creek
Dan,
is,
do you mind if she finishes questions?
Go
So
ahead.
it's been as high as 300 CFS at Castle Creek. So it does respond to localized storm events. which for the locals, I imagine, is important, but
Okay. And then I have two more things, if you don't mind.
sure.
One, this contract is backdated through last year,
Through October, yes.
and you would not be putting in any gauges till April. That's effectively half a year, but you want to be paid
So-
for the whole year.
The one gauge that is still continuing to run as full-time would be funded as a full year. The other gauge is not being funded as full year, it would be funded from April through September. And that's the pricing that's in there.
And the third thing is, Bennington County has already agreed to fund part of these for this year and last year. I'm wondering why you're double dipping.
They have not agreed to fund them for this year. They agreed to fund them last year because they wanted to ensure that the record continued.
That was approved at what time last year? For this fiscal year, correct?
No, they agreed to fund them last year for last fiscal year.
And I believe they partially funded you this year.
No, that agreement went through September 30.
And you present it again.
Went through September 30. No, we have not presented it to Bennington County again. They wanted to wait to see what the outcome of this was.
And on
What we have presented to them is the net warrant system. The two agreements are separate.
same stream,
Same string.
same
Pardon, Creek.
gauging location?
No. No, it's a separate agreement for these two gauges that we have had with Bennington County.
Okay. And I know during our last meeting, everyone was furloughed. But before that time period, you'd met with Dan Berkey. Can you explain that to us a little?
He just stopped in and asked if I could work up those numbers for the board to consider. And so we did that at his request and presented that.
And now I'd like to take a minute to ask you to disclose your conflict of interest. You didn't have the board's approval, you were not chairman of the board, and went there as a personal reason to seek somebody to ask the board for money. That is a major conflict of interest, sir.
It's not a conflict of interest.
You went to somebody and asked them to come ask us for money.
I asked them to present a funding agreement for the board's
You
consideration.
were not chairman, and you didn't have the board's approval to do such. Is that true? Because I remember you telling people we couldn't go to Bennington County and speak about water issues there without the board's voted approval. So is it do as I say or do as I do? So do you have a conflict of interest now?
No, I don't.
That's what I thought.
James, what's the conflict of interest? What monetary, you do know what conflict of interest is?
Oh, I'm well aware.
Okay, what
I have
monetary,
three sources in
what
government right
monetary
now.
gain is he getting by
I
bringing
can't
these
disclose
here?
it now. If I disclose it, it's going to the sheriff's department.
If you can't disclose it, it doesn't exist.
Oh, no, I can.
Well, then take it to the sheriff's department. But at this board meeting, anybody from here can go to a source and ask for a project, and somebody can present it. You can't tell them that we can
No, we
accept
were
it.
specifically told by the board we had board approval to speak to any entity in official capacity.
Oh,
Mr.
yeah.
Bierke jumped the shark
He's
and
not.
did that
He
without.
didn't ask her in his physical capacity. He asked them to bring to
He
present.
went there as
to
a
the
board member and asked him to bring it to the board.
You
How
can
more
go
official
anywhere you
could it
want.
be?
Ask somebody to come here.
No,
to
we
present
were actually
something.
told we
you
couldn't
can't
by that
tell them.
man
You
right
just
next to
can't
you.
tell them that we're going to do it. But
Oh,
you
wait
can
a-
bring somebody in here to ask us, James. So stop starting fights, will you?
Let's stop this right now.
Because I'm going to get to the conflict of
You're
interest
out of
with the
order.
city.
Well, then get to
You're
it.
out of order.
When do you cut the deal with the city?
When I cut what deal with the city?
The 50K.
Went down and you were there at one of those meetings.
Yeah, but oddly enough, I wasn't told about the next one, even though I was on the committee.
You weren't on the committee. There was no committee.
Yeah, there was a
There
committee.
was no committee. I brought that up at the meeting. We're going to deal with this one first. We can go
Great.
deal with that. Is there any other issues by board members regarding this proposal for
I've got a
funding
follow-up
these?
question. Sorry. Go Based on the responses that you provided earlier, it sounds like there's more than one stream gauge on at least one of these streams. You said that.
Sure. I mean, even Rose Fork, it's the only one. Castle Creek, there is one below the dam as well, that the Bureau of Rec funds.
Okay. So what's the benefit of those that you're asking us to fund?
Again, it's that indication of how the aquifer is doing to our climatic changes.
Okay, and
And they do vary.
We can't get that from the other gauges that are on the same streams?
Well, there is nothing on Rose Fork, so further downstream would have enough input so you would not see that signature. And the other one is below a dam, so again, you would not see that signature.
Mr. Chairman? I'll get to you in the public here, but Greg
Might be
can
able to help a little.
just go ahead, Ron, you got a comment?
Yeah, just an observation, I guess. In the past life, I also benefited, from, these long record gauges as we attempted to develop water budgets, et cetera, for planning purposes. And I think that the board is currently funding, a systems analysis modeling project through School of Mines and Technology. And I haven't been a party to an update from those folks right now, but I would presume that these gauges that are in the watershed are going to be real key pieces of information coupled with their land use modeling and water yield modeling to try and help develop that systems analysis that's going to help inform how in the future the combined resources of Deerfield Reservoir, Pactola Reservoir combined with natural flows are going to be used in the most efficient manner for the variety of either consumptive or non-consumptive uses we've got on those two stream systems. So to me, we're kind of in the middle of a big modeling project right now where these kind of pieces of information are really critical. So from my perspective, if we want to do something with these things in the future with modeling and efficient use of water, the more information we have to inform a water budget, particularly above and below reservoirs, to understand how those systems interact would be a valuable resource.
Can I respond to that?
Sure.
So, and I respect your opinion. From my perspective, I think if there was an issue with these, somebody would have heard something, especially the director. But we haven't heard anything. I mean, one of them's been offline for a year and a half, and nobody's screaming about it. So, I mean, why should we go back and reinstall it if there's not a call for it?
Mr. Chairman, if I can move.
Yes, go ahead.
I don't necessarily know that these stream gauges are things that gain the attention of a great number of people. It's more of the scientific community and the evaluatory, the community of folks that are looking at water management. So, if a gauge goes offline, like they do at times, then they will attempt to use various kinds of predictive tools to project what might be going on based on the period of record. That period of record may or may not change, so that you're speculating then as you use those predictive tools. So if you have a chance to have gauges in strategic locations, it's better than a predictive tool if you're really trying to get at the question of, let's say, a watershed scale water budget. So that would be my thought of the value and the fact that scientists don't usually get really bent out of shape. They try and find another way around to solve that missing data, for example. And this has been missing only for a year, so it's maybe not as of a serious demand as it might be if it was gone for a longer period of time and they had to guess more.
Yeah, I understand that. I'm an engineer too, so how many other stream gauges do you have that you guys fund in the hills?
I probably couldn't pull that off with other agencies or solely USGS.
Well, that you guys fund. that you found in whole?
Well, within the Black Hills, I would guess. there's
Dozens?
No. The majority of them are similar to this one, where it's matched with where USGS pays a portion and other partners pay the other portion. The ones that USGS is allowed to fully fund are typically ones that are on borders. So between the Belle Fourche River at the state line. So they have to meet certain criteria, and it's typically borders or federal compact that drives the requirement for them to be there.
And maybe how critical they are?
No, they really don't care how critical they are. They have to meet other criteria. So, no, I would love to put these on that list, but I'm not able to do that.
So in your opinion, these are critical gauging stations?
I think these are very important for the management of the water resources here in the Black Hills. They may
Very
not
important.
be as important for the national level,
Okay.
they're important for local level.
Okay, just for the record, I disagree. If something's very important, if it goes away for a year and a half, people notice. So,
Understand?
Anything else? Nick?
nope, thank you.
Now we had someone from the public, please. Could you identify yourself, please?
I'm Dr. Lisa Kuza. I'm from South Dakota School of Mines and Technology, and I just want to say that I have heard multiple faculty members be upset about the lack of these gauge stations. It influences groundwater-related projects when they're looking at the aquifers. It influences modeling capabilities, and it influences a project that I currently have with the graduate student as well. So I guess there's a little bit of evidence of people wanting these stations.
Okay, thank you.
I've got a follow-up question on that, if I could.
Go ahead.
So, were you unable to find other data to use? And, what did you use in lieu of this data?
There's nothing that can replace the data.
There's no other data available?
Not for these gauge
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else from the public that has anything to add? James, go ahead.
When you guys presented last year about this, I brought up and you confirmed that Wyoming has significantly cut hundreds of their stream gauges because they're now managing them themselves.
Okay.
And they're doing it at a huge cost savings. Because I looked up how much the gauges cost retail. And what we're being billed on is if we're buying a new gauge every year, except for we don't even own the equipment. And I even suggested School of Mines or another entity monitor the gauges and turn in the data to you, and I believe you told me that was unacceptable. Is that still the case?
We're not allowed to publish other people's data without verifying it. So there's
Even
a
if
cost
it's-
associated with that.
Even if it's on the same transmitter and transmits right to you?
That's exactly right, because it's based on the field data as much as the actual physical collection of the data. It's driven by the number of surveys to ensure elevations at state level. It's wintertime ice measurements. It's all sorts of field data that has to be documented and carried out and has to be done to the standards that USGS does nationally, so that all of our data is comparable from one site to the next.
Didn't your field examiner also admit that sometimes it went 8 weeks without visiting these sites due to weather conditions?
8 weeks would be unusual, but yes, at times it may mean, but we still have the winter measurements. They typically are on a 6-week cycle.
So, if it's every 6 weeks and Rhodes Fork and Castle Creek are not horribly far apart, why would it take till April to put the gauge back in?
Because of a 5-week furlough, so we have all sorts of gauges that we need, that we haven't been able to bill out to, that they are now busy billing to. I didn't think it made sense to suggest funding it for March when I couldn't guarantee that it would be installed by then. That would be inappropriate.
Are you through, James? Steve?
I got a follow-up question to James. He said that you said that there's a difference in what Wyoming does, and they're able to have a significant cost difference. What is the difference of what they're doing that we're not doing, that there was such a significant cost difference, I guess would be my question.
I honestly don't know the field methods that the state of Wyoming is using. I do know that their costs are based on the fact that they bought all of their equipment over a very short time frame, and it does not include equipment replacement.
Their entire budget included repairs and everything else. They told me exactly after 2 years, which they haven't had time to depreciate everything yet, that their costs were 50% of what their cost share used to be. So they're basically doing it for 25% of the price that USGS is doing it for.
Are they tied into your U.S.,
Pardon?
your national, are they tied into that?
Are they?
Yes, I didn't think so.
No, they're tied into their own state site.
Database.
They have their own state database. It uploads exactly the same, and USGS staff can even look at it from the state's website.
Okay. Any other comments? I guess we don't have a motion on the floor. Is there a motion? The motion would be to approve funding for these two stream gauges.
I guess I got to follow up to James' question there, because I'm looking at what is the benefit of having the USG versus the state site that James is talking about. I mean, if you're talking 25% of the funding, I'm just curious.
The state of South Dakota is not interested in doing them, to my knowledge. The last time we talked with Mark Rath, they were not interested in doing them.
So we don't have ability to tie into a state site, basically.
Actually, the state law says DNR is the one responsible for monitoring stream gauges. By law, not the water board, DNR.
Mr. Chairman, I've got one of the, just for the benefit of the newer people here, I just wanted to reiterate one of the other issues that I had, I guess, with the funding, is that if these are so critical, then why don't we just buy them? I mean, why don't we do it? If these are absolutely critical to, you know, to what we do here, then why aren't we doing that? Why does the federal government come in and do this for us? Why are we doing this? I mean, if this is an absolutely critical infrastructure need, then maybe we should be doing it ourselves, funding everything. I don't think it is a critical thing. I don't.
I will say I do. Would you come? Oh, come on, identify yourself.
I'm Joanne Moyes. I'm with the South Dakota Geological Survey, which is a program under DENR. And I think if you guys are leaning towards the negative on this, I think that you should have some of DENR representatives that actually do the stream gauging come and say something, because budget-wise, man-wise, it's my understanding we don't have the funds to take over all of the stream gauges around South Dakota. And that's why we kind of have a cooperative agreement with USGS. That's correct. They do some, we do some. Just like they do some observation wells to monitor groundwater, and South Dakota does the same thing, DENR, but it's not the same. It's a cooperative agreement. We use their data and they use ours. So, and I know my particular boss, Tim Conlon from the Geological Survey, was very disappointed that that data was not there for them to use in flooding possibilities this last week. This last week. So I think it is a good idea that we have that data, and it's a continuous data.
Mr. Chair, I've got a
Just
follow-up to
a
this.
second. Mr. Williams, he hasn't spoken yet.
Thanks for letting me go see the site. They actually gave me a ride out to see the one that I couldn't find because it was well hidden. And that was the one at Rhodes Fork. And I'm concerned, what really got me was when I came back, I think I missed the meeting that followed the 65 people that were at the meeting, all claiming that this stream gauge had something to do with flood. Now, the flooding part is just because you're trying to come up with a baseline. Is that right when you add it to your database? The data that comes from Rhodes Fork goes back to your offices. It's manipulated. Then that is a baseline for flow from the Madison Formation for both gauges, right?
Both gauges are an indication of flow, yes,
Yeah.
spring flow. There is some runoff that happens.
Yeah, but the hysteria that was brought to the meeting just before that was that these were going to be critical in trying to identify incoming floods, and possibly the only way they could do that would be if they were in a microburst. That wasn't a microburst. It'd have to be a pretty major thing to overflow
A spring.
they have to overflow back over the lake. So, you know, this is not really a flood, immediately emergency kind of gauge at all, right?
No, that is correct.
No. And that's what was misrepresented by.
They're for resource management, not flood.
Yeah, right.
That one gauges are for flood.
And I wish I'd have been here to be able to explain that at that meeting. But thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Nathan?
I had a follow-up to what Ms. Noyes mentioned. So basically, we've got two federal groups that are doing the same thing, or two governmental groups that are doing the same thing. One federal and one state, right?
But we're not doing the same specific areas. Like, we don't
I understand.
have a gauge at the same gauge they do.
Right.
We have a cooperative agreement that they do some and we do some
Mhm.
in different areas. So,
Good.
but I know that, not getting ahead of it, but some of the data that they need for stream flow in conjunction with water quality management, there was some gauges that we don't have enough data, or another member of the DNR in my office didn't have enough data to do a study that we needed to. And so when we need that data and it's not there, it's pretty hard to do some things that we need.
But is
I
this
know that doesn't make sense, I'm pretty vague, but yeah.
is this the model that's best for South Dakota?
What model? I'm sorry.
To have this responsibility split between two governmental entities, federal and state, or should it be a state function? Should we be providing funds to your office to do this function?
I'm not in charge of.
I mean, one of the, what we've just seen, what was just admitted to was that some of the services apparently haven't occurred for some time because the federal part of what's going on was furloughed. So we're at the whim of the federal government for this critical function.
I can't speak to that. As things were becoming critical, they were changing the status such that field staff were going to go out and collect measurements at all gauges. That was a national decision. So had it extended into week 6, we would have been out collecting that data.
It seems like if it's a critical function that, I mean, it should have been
But that would have
ongoing.
been a regular cycle of 6 weeks.
Ron, did you have a question?
Mr. Chairman? Yeah. As I understand, the discussion, and I appreciate, the various comments, these two gauges are signatures for, our groundwater in the Black Hills, as they play a big role in, our understanding of the entire water cycle in the hills. We've got a karst system here, so it's really a very important kind of a deal. It's all groundwater driven, so these gauges have a signature on that groundwater system in terms of their utility and water management for all the downstream uses and through the reservoir system and how they program things. So with that in mind, I would move that we approve funding of the gauges from October 2018 to September 2019 in the amount of $11,012.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Tom. Any discussion?
Yeah, one more thing.
All right.
I'd like to reiterate that the state law says stream gauges are to be funded by DENR. It's very clear. It's a law. It's not a suggestion. It's not a volunteer. It's a law.
Any other comments?
Well, I guess I can't speak to if you could give me the citation, I'd like to look at it.
Chuck Jasper gave it to us last meeting.
Okay, I missed that. Was it in the minutes so I could look at it?
Dan?
I would have to, I don't know if I have a specific.
I'm just interested.
Yeah,
but irregardless of that, the common convention for the 40 years or so that I've been working in South Dakota is there are many occasions when other entities will step into the void to help cooperatively fund gauges in their area of interest. And so, to me, with West Dakota Water Development District having an area of interest that encompasses both Deerfield and Pactola Reservoir and the watersheds, this would be an area where the Water Development District would have a very play an active role in helping to fund these gauges that give a signature to the groundwater and help our water managers do the best they can to maximize the beneficial uses of those resources.
I didn't say that. What I'm saying is, are you willing to pay double for the same job? Because that's basically what you're asking for.
In the void right now between whether we can invent a new system that we don't have any
No,
kind of...
DNR has the system in place. And DNR...
No, they don't.
They do not have the system in place.
They are already monitoring stream gauges. They just said that. They are already monitoring some stream gauges. Why can't we fund them for less to do the same too?
Well, in the interim, I guess I'd like to see these be funded. If we can figure that out in the intervening time between now and September, that would be a great thing to save money and to get the same kind of data.
We even offered to do it at the School of Mines, but USGS refused. Because the School of Mines said they could do it for the equipment cost and lab fees.
Any more discussion? I think we'll go ahead and vote on this. All in favor of the motion to fund these,
Aye.
indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign.
Nay.
Roll call, please.
Harris,
Aye.
Bialotta,
Nay.
Mack,
Aye.
Williams,
No.
Rollinger,
Aye.
Jovic,
Nay.
Driscoll,
Abstain.
Bierke,
Aye.
Cole.
Yes?
Motion carries 5-3.
All right. Thank you. All right, moving on to item 9. Or 10, excuse me, item 10.
10.
City of Rapid City partnering for funding for HPV and crossover DNA studies of Rapid Creek. It was brought up earlier, one of the things when we were talking about this study late last summer is the possibility of looking for partners in funding this proposed phase 2 of the water quality study that we did before in Rapid Creek, basically from Canyon Lake out to the water reclamation plant. So we did meet with the city and talked to the Public Works Department down at City Hall, and Dave Van Cleve from the Water Reclamation facility who worked with us on the phase one. And so they took it under advice and got back with us, and they are willing to partner with West Dakota Water Development on this phase two study. As you can see by the funding agreement that's included in the packet, up to $50,000. Talking to Dan Coon, he's the Assistant Public Works Director, the way this would work would be if the West Dakota Water Development District approves these two contracts moving forward, they would then take this proposal to the Rapid City Council for their approval. So the funding, so if we decide to act on this, these two items tonight, it would be contingent, what I would suggest would be contingent upon the city funding up to $50,000 of these two studies. Is there, and we do have some representatives here for these two studies, two consultants, standing Dr. Murray and Emily Martinez. We know them from before. Is there, I guess we should really probably have a motion on the floor before we go into discussion. We didn't do that last time.
I have a question. In the meeting I was able to attend to that I was notified of, the city was talking about giving half. Now it's down to 25%.
I suggested it. I asked if they can go half. They decided to go 25%. That's their decision.
No one else was there to negotiate? Just
After that meeting, he came back with this proposal. It wasn't a second meeting. This is what came out of that meeting that you were at. I went down there afterwards because when we got it, there was a few things that needed to be changed, yes.
So there was a second meeting. You just went by yourself. Thanks. That's what I needed to hear.
It was not a second meeting.
You just said you went down there by yourself.
After we got
I'd like to hear about the project, so you guys can argue about this later. Could we actually hear about the project? I mean, I'd like to know some information. I'm new to the board. I know the other board members here.
Well, the first one is the source identification. So that's H2E.
I know there's a lot of new directors, so I can give you some history on the project and phase one and stuff and kind of how we got to this point. I'm Emily Martinez. I worked for H2E. We were the administrators here for several years. And during that time, the board had decided that they really wanted to study Rapid Creek more because we've had this fecal coliform impairment, E. coli impairment, for about 18 years in Rapid Creek. So we volunteered and wrote a DNA testing plan and worked with the school minds and the DE&R and came up with this plan, this project for the board, and ended up getting funding, and we studied 4 sites on Rapid Creek. So we went out every month for a year and tested these 4 locations on Rapid Creek. It was Dark Canyon, right below Canyon Lake, on St. Patrick Street, and then below the wastewater treatment plant. So the whole goal behind that project was to DNA test this bacteria in the creek and try to source track it, figure out where it was coming from. So by doing it monthly for a year, we were able to look at seasonal variations and things like that in the creek. And what we ended up finding, I won't give you the full details of what we found, but basically we found that there's a really high amount of human bacteria in the creek starting at St. Patrick Street, and steadily, once you get down to the wastewater treatment plant, it exceeded every month for the entire year by 20, 30 times what the standard is. So there's really, really high levels. So what we couldn't figure out is why we were seeing spikes in human DNA starting at St. Patrick's Street. There are several different sources and things where that could have been coming from. So this study adds sampling locations. It studies those same 4 locations so that we can look at annual trends then from what we tested before to now, and compare those 4 sites, as well as adding quite a few locations, mostly focused on that East St. Patrick Street down past the wastewater treatment plant, to try to pinpoint where those spikes are coming from. There's groups of septic systems over kind of in Green Valley. It could be coming from there. There is places before St. Patrick's Street, like the industrial park and stuff, where there's in-streams that come in. We're going to test right after those to see if maybe we could isolate those areas of town and figure out where it was coming from. So when the board came to H2E about 6 months ago and asked us to kind of look at this again and come up with a cost estimate on what it would cost to add an extra sites to look more in detail at those areas. So that's, we came to a couple meetings with the board and we kind of put together a proposal and went back and forth on different budgets on how much that would cost. This was, after going back and forth a couple times, this was like kind of a really short summary of what we talked about. And there's a map with the potential locations there. So the increase, it goes from 4 sites to 11. So it's quite a bit more sites. You guys have it in there too?
Yeah, we have it in the packet. So.
It's on page 39 of the packet, at least the map is.
38's the letter, and then the map's on 39.
One other additional thing that the board did ask me to put in here is testing 2 wells per month to see if there is any effect from the stream to those wells. You'll see that in there, the well test, 2 samples per month. That's like $17,000 to do the DNA testing and analysis through source molecular is pretty expensive. So,
Are those wells on this map?
They are not. We have not picked what the wells would be. That was just something they wanted to include it in the budget.
They were going to be downstream from the water reclamation plant.
Yes, yeah. That was the one thing they talked about, was having to be kind of downstream from the wastewater treatment plant.
Okay.
Yeah, so then from our part of this collaborative study, we had previously developed a molecular tool for assessing the health risks associated with fecal contamination of waterways. And so we sort of did this to address the problem that South Dakota has as being the #1 highest rate of shade toxigenic E. coli infections in the country. And so, you know, this phase 2 that we were asked to put in has actually prompted a lot of other agencies, including the Department of Health, a whole team of infectious disease physicians, among other people, to sort of get on board and see if we can actually come up with the link. Is the water, you know, physically making South Dakotans sick? And so phase 2 not only is important in that spatial and temporal study, it'll be really important in potentially mitigating these diseases that we're seeing in the clinic.
Are there any questions from the board? Ron?
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Nathan.
I just had a question based on what you just said there. So the data that you said that people are getting sick in South Dakota, is that all of South Dakota?
It is.
Western South Dakota?
It is all of South Dakota. I just pulled up the most recent data, which would be December of last year. We had an all-time record high again of staph infections. There tends to be slightly more around, you know, the eastern side of the state, presumably just because they have a higher population. But we see these infections in all of the regions across the state.
Ron?
Just a quick follow-up to that, and then I had a couple of other questions. So with these records of infections, are we seeing them on this water body? Can we track them back to like...
That's what we're trying to do. So you guys will fund the ability for us to pull out these bacteria of the, you know, from the water, analyze them, and then sort of a cult study that we have going on is the Department of Health will send us isolates, the bacteria from the patients, and we'll do genetic comparisons. Are they the same? And then you would get your sort of cause and effect.
Okay. So what would be the actionable item then? Because there is no pathogenic, you know, criteria in water quality standards.
Right.
What would be the next step,
There is
once
for the
we
septic
learn this
plan.
information?
So, part of my answer is that we just provide the science, and then, people like you have to make the regulatory decisions as to how to proceed. But just knowing that, maybe this stretch of water is much more dangerous than another might help you focus your resources on mitigating that problem.
Yeah, we're not a regulatory entity here.
I think one of the reasons the city's interested in is exactly what you just described, is, they have an interest in the water quality going through Rapid City for residents and people that use Rapid Creek.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I guess I'm just trying to figure out what the actionable item is, under the MS4, city NPDS permit, the water treatment plant's in compliance. Ever since it is in compliance under the current permit.
No, it actually failed. That's what they were
failed.
talking
That's
about.
what they were talking about.
It was 30 times the legal dumping limit.
Their immersion, recreation, and limited
It failed
contact
even the winter time.
is only in the summertime.
No, it failed.
Well, they just got to turn the UV lights on.
They turn the UV lights
They
off
turn
in
them off.
the
They
winter
turn them
time.
off. They're still they have a permissible amount, and they failed it.
Okay, yeah. I got some more questions, but we'll go ahead.
Okay, Don, do you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to tell you that below Canyon Lake, these issues weren't a problem, were they?
Issues of pathogenicity.
Correct. You didn't see human pathogenicity
We saw
for
it
those.
everywhere. So even in places
You found
where,
this.
The threshold for immersion recreation said that the water was safe, we found bacteria that potentially could cause infection in humans.
At every sampling point?
That's different than I understood it.
Yeah, I thought you said only after it entered Rapid City was human found versus up above.
Right, so that's sort of the beauty of this, is we can sort of start to see, where these pathogenic genes are coming from. So I can only say whether the pathogens are there, and she can say, potential sources, and together that makes
So the
sense.
pathogens are there, but the ones we're thinking of are the human ones that we're considering.
Right, so I can't differentiate with the tool that I have right now between, a cow source bacteria.
Bob, were you talking about fecal coliform?
Well, the
Right,
beauty of
difference
these
is
two
human versus
studies,
deer.
the beauty of these two studies was the combination of pathogenicity with the determination if it's human, cow, deer, goose, whatever, and that, by combining those two, they knew where they were sampling. That's why they had 4 sites, and why we've asked for several more sites now is so that we can start to narrow down the location of the major inflow of human waste.
That's correct.
And it's an 8-mile distance from the bottom of Canyon Lake to the east St. Patrick Street, where we first noticed, if I'm correct, at Site 3, we noticed that there was human waste at East St. Patrick Street Bridge. And then when we got down to the waste treatment plant, Dave Van Cleve mentioned to us that they'd started doing studies where they were sampling just above the outflow. And we were sampling, a quarter mile below the outflow. And it was breaking records at that location. I think that's what Emily was mentioning when she said, I don't remember the exact figure.
Way over the limit, whether it was in the winter or the summer. You'd see really big trends where you'd see spikes in the winter and a much bigger dip in the summer, but it was still exceeding the limits.
And we set up a chance for directors to go visit the waste treatment plant and see some of the tools they use. There was explanations that the plant's getting old, it needs to be funded, to the tune of $100 million or something. I don't have the exact figure.
Somewhere in that ballpark.
But that to set up a new treatment plant, because in the winter, they're dumping raw sewage into the Rapid Creek.
No, it's not raw sewage.
Well, it doesn't have the turbulent, but it has all of the pathogenistic
They're
material.
dumping the water.
Because what they're doing
the
is
leach water.
They're still using the same treatment process in the wintertime.
No, they weren't. They were turning
No,
off the
they're
UV
shutting
lights
off
and
the
killing
UV
all
lights.
the
The biological
pathogens.
treatment processes are the same, whether it's
They
winter.
were just sorting out the sludge,
taking out the
basic
solids.
and that was
Reducing
it.
the organics.
But they weren't killing the bacteria.
No, and they don't by their permit, no, they don't have to in wintertime.
Right, but by their permit, they're not allowed to illegally dump per a certain amount, and they were exceeding that, which is why when we went to the city, they were supposed to pay for half of it. Because if they're in violation of their permit,
They weren't, when we went down to the city, we had zero. We had zero money when we walked in the door. They're offering $50,000 to partner on this thing. That's not a true statement, what you just said.
Was it a state,
I suggested, I asked them if they would fund 50%. That was kind of my thing, but they came back with $50,000, so. Anyway.
I do have a question for the girls. I know last time we talked, you were talking about doing live versus dead bacteria.
Yes,
Is that possible to do the live in this study?
Not with this type of money. So Source Molecular, who she's sending the samples to, I'm partnering with their lead scientist there and their CEO. They just came out with a new technology. It's called digital droplet PCR. It's very complicated, but the gist of it is they can sort out whether this DNA that we're looking for comes from a live cell or a dead cell, which makes a big difference in whether or not people can get sick or not. And so we had talked with them about the possibility of getting that technology rolled out here to be sort of the first site to use it. We did write a couple of grants for it. They did not come through. So that would be probably a $250,000 project to do that.
Okay.
But I mean, we're still working on trying to get that done here, but funded through other means.
Go ahead, Bob.
Is there any way the School of Mines can help on this? I mean, or is there a...
Not with digital droplet PCR. They have one molecular biologist on campus, Dr. Sinden, and he really doesn't do this type of molecular work. So I talked to him, and he's not interested in performing it.
That's too bad.
I'm working on getting a molecular biology lab set up at Western Dakota Tech, but that's pretty costly to get it started. So it'll be a couple of years before I'm able to, personally do these things.
Thanks.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, Bob.
A couple of things, I guess. If I read your first phase report correctly, as well as the approved TMDL, and even some of the work that's been going on since the 80s on Rapid Creek, we kind of have an idea that, the St. Patrick Street area or thereabouts is really, the nexus of the human stuff. The rest of it is, either animal of some kind or another. So why would the scope of your study include, those areas upstream that we already have a pretty good understanding there's not a problem, and we might be able to focus our efforts, in the downstream reaches. And then secondly, since the TMDL isn't on a schedule to be reviewed again until 2030, are we ahead of the curve on trying to get anything done? And wouldn't the DENR wouldn't want to maybe be a potential source of money as well, since that's in their purview? It feels a little heavy to me on the board for the kind of work we're doing here.
Well, when we reviewed this study, we were looking at the sampling site, and I think maybe Bob probably could speak to this better than I could, but we decided to continue to sample at some of those, the first phase, all the first phase sampling points we're going to continue to sample in this phase 2.
I guess I'm thinking of the cost of it and how it relates to our annual income. And I would maybe ask for thoughts on whether to rescope it to make it a little bit less costly, to move it down to where we know there are problems, and then to get some DENR help, to accelerate or inform their TMDL work. Right now, it's pretty low priority on their schedule from the integrated report. It isn't supposed to be looked at again until 2030.
So I can just speak to the first part of your question, the reason why we have to have the upstream sites. It gives us continuous data from the last study. It gives us some control data. And then what's interesting about the way bacteria exchange genes is it can come from any E. coli of any source. So even though your primary concern might be the human source, it's really important to know what's going on with the bacteria from the other sources upstream, because as you get past the wastewater treatment plant, you basically have this big mixing pot where you can redistribute these genes, and that's where capital is formed. So it's very important to not neglect those upstream sites.
So let's say we would go forward and learn all these things. What would the regulatory bodies, whether it's the DENR or the city, or what would they do?
Yeah, so again, that's not necessarily our decision. I think a lot of it would depend on the results of the study, as to how to proceed. I eventually see as a nation that the EPA might potentially adapt more molecular technology. Was it just the last couple of years that they approved the PCR for just doing fecal coliform levels? So it's, slowly on that level headed in the direction of molecular biology. And then to speak to the second part of your question, I agree that this is an expensive study. Molecular biology studies aren't cheap. But I'd like to point out that Linda and I kind of sat down and roughed out some numbers. We're providing about $150,000 in in-kind match in our time, resources, and equipment. So if that helps you sort of fund our $50,000 portion of the project, knowing that we're matching, almost $150,000, I don't know if that bears any weight in your decision. And if you would like a formal letter outlining that in kind, we would be happy to provide that.
I do have the suggestion to reduce the cost of this project. I think keeping those upstream sites is important, but I do think the study is more focused on the water quality of Rapid Creek. So I think that if the board was glancing at some of these numbers, the first thing that would be better for you to remove would be to take out the well testing, which is $17,000, and to keep the 11 Rapid Creek sites. I think those give you a better idea of what's going on in the creek as opposed to spending money on the well testing. So.
James had a question.
James, go ahead.
I can kind of speak to some of the science on this. The reason why there's several reasons why we're keeping the upstream. One is control. Two is there was other city contributions, like near the dog park. Imagine that. It was full of dog fecal matter in Rapid Creek. It wasn't city people. It wasn't leach fields. It was dog feces. What a big surprise by the dog park. And in Canyon Lake, full of geese. It was full of goose feces. But we go through city, and most of the city was pretty clean until we get to East St. Pat, and it just elevated. When we get down by the septic, the water treatment plant, it went through the nose to where the water was poisonous to walk through. It was literally a human hazard to have on your skin. It was so bad. In Rapid Creek. This is a creek where people fish, and you're talking about the water being so contaminated that you'd immediately have to wash your skin.
Specifically contaminated by what?
Human fecal matter.
Okay.
And it was that high of a level, it blew out the regulations, it blew out the city's permits, where if the city has a busted sewer line, or the water treatment plant is faulty, or they're illegally dumping beyond what their permit allows, it would be our body as a board to then inform a jurisdiction that has superseding power over the city to make them enforce the actions.
The approved, Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
The approved TMDL the city has for this reach back in the work that was done back in 2010 is very similar to the information that we're gaining now. This is a little more precise, but it's very similar. And I think the city has been, pursuing some of this work to try and, slow, the stormwater runoff. It's all, a lot of it's event-driven. But I'm still struggling with, the actionable items on this. Are we too far out ahead of the regulators? We need to get them more involved in this deal in terms of the actionable potential.
If you want to do something about water quality, this is it. When you know of a source that's poisoning people, it's...
I would disagree with that. We know the sources now, and there can be actionable items taken on the ground, on the watershed, in the riparian area, in the dog park. hazing of waterfowl, etc., you know, working on the water plant. We know actions that can be taken now to make improvements. I don't necessarily see how more, and I hate to be, you know, argumentative to you ladies, I really appreciate your work, but more esoteric information when we already know what we can do in actionable ways. That's my opinion.
Part of the thing is that the strains of bacteria, they don't stay one strain. They're commingling and making different bacterias. And, you know, I could coin the term superbacteria, but you're getting very, very potent when you're mixing multiple different species bacterias in the creek mixed with human, which, if you listen to most people, humans are probably the dirtiest things around.
He's right. Human bacteria is the worst for human health.
Well, I agree that that's all bad, but what are we going to do as a result of it?
We went to the city and asked them to check into the plant, and we went to the plant to look at it, and that's why we asked the city to fund half of this to determine very closely where exactly the amount, because the amount of sewage coming out has to be such a magnitude that it's either an entire subdivision, a broken sewer line, or the water treatment plant. It's that much. So it's not like it's a leach field or something else. There's a significant portion of human fecal matter entering Rapid Creek. And if you're talking about monitoring stream gauges, but don't care that the stream has floaters in it, what do we care about stream gauges?
Where is the DE&R in this whole deal if the city is in such large violation?
Well, I think
I don't know.
I think he's misrepresenting what the situation is, quite honestly. They've had a few occurrences out there, but I mean it's very small. And you know, when we went to the city, we talked to them about partnering with us on this project, and you know they had some obviously had some internal meetings, and Dave Van Cleve who was involved in the first phase on this thing, and manages the water reclamation plant. He was involved in these discussions because he was at the meeting. But anyway, the city participating in this study, obviously they're interested in the results coming from the study for their own information. Well, James is right. I suggested that they go 50%, but they number one, they didn't have it budgeted, and so they're having to, you know, come up with $50,000. I assume it's from the enterprise funds. I don't know that, but you know, they already had their budget set for this year, so they weren't expecting this project to come along. But they've been kind enough to offer $50,000 for this study as a partner, and also having some of their staff involved with the meetings that we have with our consultants as they go through this study. So. To me, if they're interested in finding the results of this study, it's something that, and they have more expertise probably than we do on their staff. But anyway, well, let me go with Steve.
I had a question. After what James had just said there, I heard you say it basically almost the same thing, that when it got to the treatment plant, it went up exponentially. Is that correct?
I said the human health. The human bacteria are worse for the human health. There are some indications that, you know, the bacteria after the wastewater treatment plant from the human source spiked, which wasn't necessarily unexpected because they do turn off their UV light over the winter. As far as their testing, the wastewater treatment plant testing goes, you know, they perform their own tests every month, and according to their own internal QC, they were within the threshold most of the year. I think they had, you know, two or three violations on their internal measurements. We sort of have, you know, offered to do a QC check with them and do independent measurements in terms of that, because there is a little discrepancy between, you know, the amount of human DNA we're finding after the creek and their sort of numbers of bacteria coming out of the plant. And that discrepancy could be because those bacteria are dying, but the DNA is persisting. And that is also a big problem. So, you know, they may be meeting their permit, but if the bacteria are dead and the DNA is still intact, it can be picked up by something else downstream.
And I think that's what they're interested in finding out.
And they did do some testing above the wastewater treatment plant as well. Like after we went through the study, they started testing above and below, and they were seeing exceedances in the stream above their outflow as well. So there's some, that's kind of why we're looking at a bunch of different locations in between East St. Patrick Street and the wastewater treatment plant, is because that indicates that there's another source that we're not aware of.
Well, Green Valley is right up, you know, half a mile from the treatment plant, and a lot of those septic systems are in groundwater, and so they're not getting proper treatment from the septic systems out there. Been ongoing for years, and I know they came to us for asked for some funding because they're trying to get actually hook up to put a collection system in, hook up to Rapid City. But right now, that's probably one of the sources. I don't know that, but it's probably a good chance.
Director Koch, the reason that I think we came up with this additional, if you look, they're numbered 1, 2, 3, and 4. Those sites are the original sites. The other sites, 2A, 2B, 2C, 3A, 3B, 3C, and 3D, are sites to try to narrow down where there might be the source of the contamination. Right now, all you have is that number 3, from number 3 to number 2, there is no sampling in that 8-mile reach. Okay? And so if you get sampling at different areas along that site, it goes through mainly the middle of the Rapid City and mostly through my district. Those sites, when you add those in, will help to identify where possible areas of contamination are coming from. Because we can't determine whether it comes from a broken sewer pipe or if it's somebody just running sewage right straight into the stream without figuring where in this 8-mile path those are happening. The others down by Green Valley and so forth were there. We picked those because what we wanted was a way to try to determine around that location if it's coming from them. The only way you'd know that was if at 3B there was a high level, and then at 3A there wasn't, because the stream is moving from left to right on your map. And so by breaking it into these, we can give the city a huge leg up on something they can't either afford or whatever. Go ahead, James. I'll let you go. Oh, that's right.
The other reason why we added 2 drinking wells was for the last 5 to 6 years, the city has told residents of that area that their shallow wells are polluted from bovine waste. And it was really clear in the DNA study that the bovine wasn't down there, even though the ranches and the ranchers fence off the creek because they're not allowed to put the cattle through it. But we're still being told by the city their own wells are polluted by cows. And so we specifically added the 2 wells because the city has been denying people's claims for a significant period, claiming it wasn't the city waste, even though you can visibly see the sewer plant and have watched during high rain periods overflow from the sewer plant wash raw sewage onto the creek.
Do we have a motion?
We don't have a motion.
I'm just going to comment that I agree with Director Coth. I think this is very heavy on our board. We've already got quite a bit invested in the first study, and we provided that information to the public. It's out there already. I'm not sure how much more we're going to gain from this, especially since we can't differentiate between live and dead DNA.
Yeah, this study might be a platform to get them to come here to do that with this data at a very reduced cost.
lot of money for the school.
Molecular work is not cheap. And then we do lose that value of, simultaneously monitoring clinical infections.
I'd have a tough time talking to one of my constituents, telling them that we spent all this money for this study that might be of limited value.
Well, Nathan's right, we don't have a motion on the floor. Is there anybody that wants to make a motion? Maybe we can discuss it some more.
Do you want to move? I'd move that we take this to a vote on it. Would it be both 13, 12?
Yeah, they're combined.
Yeah, 11 and 12.
Okay, so
11 and 12 then? It's 11
motion,
and 12?
yes, motion is made for, to approve the items on items number 11 and 12 on your agenda, as we've been discussing already. Steve seconded the motion, so we do have a second. Now, is there any more discussion? We do have a handout in the public. Did you come forward? You already introduced yourself, but
For those of you who are new to the board, I'm Dr. Lisa Kunza. I was the principal investigator on phase 1 and not contacted in any way about phase 2. Just wanted to point that out. Dr. Murray was one of my PhD students that I shared with Dr. Linda DeVoe at the School of Mines. There are a couple things that I want to point out. Well, first of all, is it really a phase 2? Then, the first portion of the sources, I guess, to me, in the very limited information that was provided to the public, and I haven't had conversations with you, Emily, it mentions conclusions that potentially could be based on climate, creek flow, and multiple years worth of data. I guess, to me, I don't see the study design in a way that you're going to have the ability to make conclusions based on climate, certainly, and how many phases of this would the board be considering doing. I also want to point out to the board that the funding associated with the portion that Dr. Murray has been talking about mostly goes to New Mexico Tech and hasn't been necessarily presented to the board in that way. There are 5 people that do micro and molecular work at South Dakota School of Mines and Technology. There's a whole program and an advanced degree in molecular work at Black Hills State. There's multiple faculty at both USD and SDSU that do micro and molecular work. So I guess one of the things that I would want to ask the board to consider is whether or not the board wants $50,000 for this portion of the project to basically go out of the state of South Dakota. I want to second the information that, I hope your name tag is right, that Director Koch mentioned earlier, in that in the 2018 integrated report by DENR, the section between Canyon Lake and Farmingdale, there's 2 sections, 3 and 4 are how they list them in the report. They're listed as immersion recreation as something. Do you feel like we're going to have immersion recreation that is going to influence the use of the water in the winter? Is something that I want to point out. It is not limited, it is not listed by DENR as limited contact. So those who are going out to go fishing, for example, according to that to me would be a limited contact. But it is not listed at all in these sections by DENR for that. And I agree that although it is interesting science that you might be able to get from this, maybe a more detailed study with the city to be able to figure out how to mitigate for these things might be of more interest. And it is not on the priority list for DNR, as I pitched this to DNR 5 times, I think, approximately, in the time that Dr. Murray was a PhD student. So I met with multiple people at all levels of DNR. So I will again second I'm not sure how much more information that the board is going to get from these studies that they may not have gotten before that would be beneficial for deciding various different mitigation processes. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else in the audience that has any comments on the motion? From the board members?
I have to ask a question. As I pointed out earlier, the final reports from the 2 previous studies had indicated collaboration with USGS, and I am, retired from USGS, but back to work in a rehired annuitant position. Is there any collaboration with USGS proposed as part of the second studies? If so, that would put me in a conflict of interest.
Not at this point, no. Probably we would coordinate with the DENR again and sample at the same times to utilize each other's data, but no, we don't have any connection with USGS on this project. Agreed.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes, James.
So is it true that you're now affiliated with a different university?
Yep, Linda and I have both left FD Mines, so I went to Western Dakota Tech and she went to New Mexico Tech. And since this was the assay that was developed, by us, which, is not proprietary by any means, but, if someone from SD Mines or BH would like to come forward with a proposal, it would take them about 6 months to a year to get all of the validation for their process in place. That's why we decided that it would be the most efficient use of your money to route it the way that we did. So while I agree that it looks like a lot of money is going out of state, we ran the numbers in multiple ways to figure out how you guys would lose the least amount of money in indirects and administrative costs. And so by doing that in multiple ways, this was the most efficient solution we could come up with. And I just don't have the facilities or the trained personnel here at this time where, Linda has a student who she spent the last 6 months getting on board and ready to go with this project.
And I have a comment for the board then. I'm forced to remind myself that these are stacked state and local taxpayer dollars that we take. And my motto has always been, if it's possible to keep it in our state borders since it's state taxpayer money. I love this project, and if I had no idea she didn't want to risk School of Mines. Otherwise, I'd be telling you to vote for it right now. But I might be inclined to ask the School of Mines to do that portion. No offense to you, I know you did great work, but when it's state taxpayer money, I want the money to stay within the state.
So, it was on the proposal that we put in that we weren't affiliated with School of Mines anymore, so, that's not hidden information. It was on the proposal that you guys solicited from us. We didn't come to you with this proposal.
I think it said New Mexico. Did it say New Mexico on there?
It does in the budgets.
I guess, James, I kind of agree with James a little, but what I see different here is in that, based on what you said, how high the contaminations everything was, I think maybe it's something we probably should address now that we're this far.
Yeah, so benefit of having us continue this work is we've worked out all the kinks of the method and therefore it's easier. And then both New Mexico Tech and Western Dakota Tech offered a significant match to sort of mitigate the fact that, yes, a good proportion of the money is being directed in that way.
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
I was reading through the city's proposal, and I noticed that there was one of the sections talked about having the right to review and revise parts of the study. Is that true?
They're going to have somebody assigned to do work.
Is that going to affect the way you do your job? Will you still be able to? I mean, if they come in and they say, "Well, we can't have this because it'll make everybody panic again," is that going to be how this works?
I might. From what I understand, is they're obviously going to have a monetary investment in the study, and they would like to have a representative involved in the interim meetings that we have with the board or with the city. I know you worked with the city of Rapid City on the first phase, and Dave Van Cleve, who was, and then Jan Kuhn said there's an engineer down at the Public Works Office that wants to be involved too. But I don't see them dictating how you do your work.
I would agree, and I hate to speak on behalf of them since
they're not here.
That's specifically what the contract says.
They've been very on board with promoting the science behind this.
Yeah.
And if there is a problem, they want to know it so that they can be proactive about it.
And I think they, since they're investing money, they owe it to the people in Rapid City, and I think this is probably coming from the enterprise fund, so it would be the water reclamation users that are funding this, their portion of the study.
When we did the phase one, we did meet with the DNR, the USGS, the city, everybody. We met together several times when we were coming up with a DNA testing plan, and there was a person assigned from the city to collaborate on that project. So we did get feedback from all these different entities about the project before it started. So in that regard, I don't think it's really any different.
Was that Dave Van Cleve or?
Mary.
Oh, Mary Bosworth.
Yeah,
okay.
Mary Bosworth was the person assigned, and there was a couple different city people that came a couple times, but she was the main person that was assigned.
Yeah, she's an engineer down there. They have Brandon is last. I think it's Quiet or something like his last name. Yeah.
So Bob Druckery with the wastewater treatment plant would come, and there was a big group of us that met several times when we were coming up with that project. So.
Okay. I understand what you said, but do you understand that this contract says if it's not in this contract, whatever they told you is fluff?
So I have not yet read the contract.
Under 13, unless it's written in this, whatever they told you is pandering. So if it says that they have the right to review before anybody else gets it, I'm completely out.
So I
the city's asking for a blank check on a report.
With our previous collaboration with the city of Sioux Falls, that it was more of a, just a handshake type thing where we'll give you the data first so you have time to prepare your response to the data. And I think that's kind of the similar
I think that's what I think.
it's kind of customary for the funding agencies to get the data first.
Right, but they're specifically asking to get the data first, not us, and edit the data.
It's paragraph 6.
So they won't edit the data.
They have ability to study, review, including draft and finalize your report. That's in their contract.
Yeah, and like I said,
so they can take your report, edit how they see fit, draft and finalize your report.
So I guess since this is this a contract between you guys and the city?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I guess
it's a funding agreement.
That's going to be something that you guys have.
Yeah,
to
that's something
yep.
that we need to. And we had our executive meeting. We had to go over the agenda. We talked about having our attorney take a look at that contract to see if there's any.
And did the attorney look at it yet?
No, he's not.
And why are we looking at it.
Am I reading this wrong? You guys are saying number 6, correct?
6.
And what I'm reading here, it says that both the city and the Western Dakota Water Development both will be provided input and ability to comment.
That's the way I would read them.
That's,
too.
I guess I'm underlining, that's
To
what
me,
I'm
that
reading.
makes total sense.
It says both of us will get provided with that, and we both have the opportunity. It doesn't say they get to have the final say. We're included in that.
It says they're first party on one of the cooperations.
Yeah, they're putting money into it.
Right. Put money
But,
to it doesn't mean they
you
need
know,
primary.
one of the things that
I agree with
Dan Kuhn says that normally we would be a subcontractor to them or something like this, but so this is something new for them. But they're willing to have us take the lead on this, which I think is fine.
Right.
They're also claiming the jurisdiction
So
in this.
I do agree. I think we need to have our attorney take a look at the language in here, and if there's anything that throws up a red flag, we need to go down and talk to them. But if we pass this motion, I think I would like to see us have part of the motion being that's contingent upon receiving this funding from the city of Rapid City.
Well, if we already have a motion, we can't. So you'd have to rescind the motion and change it.
Well, I'm suggesting that we do that.
I suggest we table it altogether, reading this contract with the city where they claim jurisdiction, including breach, that they're claiming study review, which if we're asking for a nonpartisan, non-biased review, I want the scientists to do it, not a city who has a dog in the fight if they're liable for polluting personal wells downstream.
Yeah, so I can say that on our previous study, both the City of Sioux Falls and East Dakota Water Development District were afforded the opportunity to provide input to the report, and we weren't obliged to change anything, but most of the comments that they gave, actually improved the report. And I foresee this being sort of the same situation where, I read it. It's not a contract between me and the city, so there's really nothing. I think that's something you guys have to hammer out.
I think if we do approve this motion, that we should have it contingent upon final agreement and funding from in the amount as shown here in the proposed funding agreement with the city of Rapid City. Anyway, the motion is to approve. Is there anybody that would like to add what I was suggesting to that motion?
I'd like to make a substitute motion. I motion that we table this until both the attorney has looked at this and discussion with the city of Rapid.
But you don't want to table it, you want to move it. You're tabling or killing it, basically, so you want to move it to another meeting, is what you want to do. That allows us time to look at this or talk to the
I don't know
city.
what the city's deadline is going to be to get to them, if we can get to them in a month.
If it's my motion, I think that the contract needed to be discussed probably before we brought up the other two. And that would require, consultation with the lawyer when he gets a chance to read it. And I really feel bad that this, I like what they did. I like the fact that they were willing to do exactly the same thing to take and expand just the sites rather than change any of the other sampling methods or other variables that we already have in this. But I don't know how to back out of this other than voting against my own motion. So, I think that this needs to be looked at. We need to agree and change some of the words, or at least have it explained. Things like choice of law principles. That's something we're going to have to ask a lawyer about. What are choice of law principles? And how do they get to go to a competent court of jurisdiction? Who makes that determination?
They did.
The city. I think it's the $50,000 that they want to help us with, like that's great, except that if it's our project, they should not.
So, is it possible to vote yes or no pending finalization of this contract, so that Emily and I know whether we're proceeding with this after the last, 8 months of discussion?
Yeah, I feel kind of sorry. This has been in front of us numerous times.
I totally understand where you're coming from, and I do think you need to get that contract hammered out, but it would be nice to know whether we have the board support and whether we need to start really, amping up the training for our students. So
We
I
can
don't know if
approve a
that's possible.
contingent on that we get the contract acceptable to the board.
It's still up for debate whether the state should do it or a state school.
I'm just saying, if you still want your project to go forward, you can do a contingent on that we can find agreeable.
Well, this is sort of starting to feel like I'm in the soup south of the treatment plant. I don't know.
Mr. Chairman, I've got several comments.
Okay, go ahead. The motion's still on the floor.
Great. One, I am going to abstain from voting just because it came up again. There'd been consultation with USGS before. I had sat in on meetings, just talking about in general, how do you address this question of bacterial contamination in Rapid Creek? It's just been a problem for years. How big a problem? Do we have rampant disease? No, but we're routinely in violation of the in-stream standards. It's been a vexing question. What are the sources of these bacteria? What is it that we do about it? The concern on the contractual language, I don't think it's onerous. This is fairly standard language, and I don't think there's any intent, like with the study review, that gives them a right to comment. It doesn't give them veto authority. This would be a pretty typical thing. I share the concerns on the costs. A $200,000 cost, largely exceeds the annual operating budget after the administrative costs are taken out. It's it's a big chunk of funding. It's nice that Rapid City has stepped forward with an offering of $50,000. It'd be nice if there would be other partners available. I'm not sure who they'd be. The bottom line on it, there's a lot of ins and outs on this one, but it is a problem that it's appropriate for this board to try to support. How do we address this question? And so, again, I'm going to abstain from the vote, but those are my thoughts.
One of the things that I've been on this board a year and a half now, and we actually cut the amount of money we're getting from taxpayers because we didn't have projects. We had $400,000 in the bank and no projects coming forward for consideration. I think this is great. We spent $150,000 of this for dredge for Canyon Lake, which they haven't completed yet. But and the game fishing parks is going to do it here in the spring, as I understand. To me, these are the kind of projects that are worth funding. In my mind, that's what we're here for. And we haven't had people lining up for projects since I've been here. That's my comment. You're lining up for a project?
I think there's 3 projects that maybe will come in front of the board at some.
That's great. We have not had that many projects come forward since I've been on the board.
But we need to get back to this and make it.
All right. There's a motion on the floor for approval. I guess there was no second.
There was a substitute motion.
Who was seconding it?
Nobody.
Well,
Okay, there's a motion to table it
James.
from James. Is there a second to the motion?
Could I get some clarification? Because there's a motion by Williams, seconded by Rollinger.
He's making a substitute motion. Go ahead and give the motion again.
The substitute motion would be to table it until the lawyer has sufficient time to examine this and review if we need to renegotiate with the city.
Okay. Did you get that, Dan?
So we want to table or postpone?
Postpone's fine.
Postpone?
Postpone, okay, so
Until we get the-
is there a second to James' motion? Seeing none, we're gonna vote on the first one then. All in favor of the motion?
For, to approve the.
Approve these two contracts? Indicate by saying aye. There's nobody voting?
Same sign.
Is there, all those,
So can there be another substitute motion to, vote on it pending approval of the contract?
That's what I tried
that's
to
not the
know
motion on the floor.
I know, can there be a second substitute motion though? I'm
Not
still
right
trying
now.
to learn the rules of.
Not right now, we have to finish
Okay.
this one first.
Well, there was no motion, so we're voting, and so I asked for people in favor, nobody, I'm in favor. Put me down as a favor. All against, indicate by same sign.
Aye.
Aye.
Roll call. That was kind of a weak eye from the nose.
Driscoll abstain.
I'm abstaining.
Yerke,
Yes.
Coe,
No.
Harris,
No.
Mailata,
No.
Mack,
Aye.
Williams,
No.
Rollinger,
No.
Jobin,
Nay.
Driscoll.
No. And
Okay, motion fails.
it should have been school. I think it's still school.
Thanks for coming.
Okay,
Doesn't say next.
thank you.
Thanks. All right, moving right along. Does anybody need a break? Or can we
Yes,
go?
so I was just gonna
All right,
signal
we
you.
got a 5-minute break.
I wanted. This is exactly what it was, but it should have been school lines, and the city's contract is horrible.